So many people are here today in Liverpool to make sure that Keir Starmer in his conference knows that this is not going away, that the British public oppose Israel's actions, they oppose wider war in the Middle East, and they oppose Britain's support for it, and we will be here to oppose him and to stop him.
Free, free! Palestine! Free, free! Palestine! Free, free! Palestine!
I'm extremely concerned about the new Labour government's policies when it comes to foreign affairs, when it comes to so-called defence, because actually I can't see any differentiation between this government's policies and the previous Tory government's policies. They're pro-nuclear weapons. Remember the so-called triple lock-on Trident during the general election campaign. They are pro-arming Israel and doing nothing to end the genocide in Gaza. They are supporting the continuation of the war in Ukraine, indeed seeking to step it up by sending long-range missiles to Ukraine for use into Russia, which risks a war between nuclear-armed Russia and nuclear-armed NATO. And they are intent on increasing military spending in Britain to 2.5% of GDP. And think what that means in terms of lost spending on other things. When new austerity is the order of the day, that money that should be spent on our homes, our hospitals, education, our infrastructure, everything that's crumbling, that will now be sent into a bottomless pit of the war machine. And this is an absolute disgrace. And one of the first things that the Labour government did when they came into office was to announce a new strategic defence review. Well, we can expect nothing positive from that, no reorientation towards how you actually achieve peace and prosperity in the world, but an endless catalogue of wars and military interventions. Their solution to solving problems is to throw money at the military. This is a disaster. It will take us towards greater conflict, whether in Ukraine or the Middle East, and it will risk nuclear war.
Labour is no different from what we had from the Tories before. Starmer and Lammy have made small cuts to arms sales, but they're really insignificant, and they really need to make a clear stand against Israel and against the genocide. And Labour's foreign policy has really not changed that much from what we had from Sunak. And in fact, if you look at what they're doing in Ukraine, they're more warmongerish than the Tory party were before. I think at the general election, we had a really significant breakthrough in Britain. We had 5 independent MPs were elected. That's the most significant left of Labour vote that we've had in this country since the early 20th century. And it wasn't just those that were elected, there were another 15 independent candidates who got more than 15% of the vote. So I think these are early days, but we have to pull the independents together around a pro-Palestinian and anti-austerity platform, and we can build an alternative to Labour.
It might take 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but we need to start somewhere, because at the moment we have a one-party system with two different names, and that's just not going to work for this country. It's not going to work for the people of this country, and it's not going to work internationally either.
What we do know for certain is that for every one of the past 77 days, Keir Starmer has drenched his hands in Palestinian blood. David Lammy has signed the death warrants of thousands of Palestinian men, women and children. And every single spineless Labour MP has made themselves complicit in genocide through their support for this government of colonial murder.
There is no pride I feel more than the pride of being a Palestinian, let alone a Scouse Palestinian. The bravery of our people is unmatched. Our culture, our flag, our heritage, never ever let that die. I would never have thought or imagined I'd see hundreds and hundreds of Palestinian flags and keffiyehs around the Albert Dock. It is very surreal. And keep it going. Don't let any of that scaremongering propaganda stop you from fighting for justice. Stop you from being on the right side of history. Because if you are silent, you are complicit. You might as well go join their conference.
This is a moral test for the new government, and a call on them today to stand up for the implementation of international law and be bold in confronting those who undermine it, regardless of who they are.
It's almost a year since the Hamas attacked in Palestine, and I would say that I am a Labour MP, and I have thought and asked for, yes, you will boo me, but I am one of the few Labour MPs that has asked for a ceasefire and the return to humanitarian aid. I'm a black, working class woman from Liverpool, and I've fought racism all of my life, and I've challenged racism all of my life. But just to make it clear, I am not an anti-Semite for standing and speaking on this platform, calling for an end of the humanitarian crisis and an end to the ceasefire. Well, what I am is I'm angry and frustrated by the lack of inertia by the movement of Western governments who have failed the Palestinian people. And what? 40,000 men, women and children have died in tragic circumstances. But comrades, you being here today sends a very strong message to the world that we have not to be silent. I will not be silenced by you or the government. So solidarity.
Before Keir Starmer took office, he promised us he would be better than the Tories. Has he been better than the Tories? Has he been better than the Tories? What did we get instead? We got a 2-child benefit cap, and we got a winter fuel allowance cut. Do not tell me you're better than the Tories when you punish the most vulnerable in our society to balance your books. Do not tell me you're better than the Tories when you continue to arm a genocide against the Palestinian people.
Thank you, comrades. I just want to say that every Sunday in Liverpool, we march for Palestine. Every time there's a demonstration in London, our comrades march to London. Well, we don't march to London. We march in London against the seat of power, against the government. The government is here. The government is here, just in the building across the way there. And if anybody knows where Keir Starmer is staying, please let me know. Merseyside pensioners want to sit down with him and tell him what we think of him. A government that can bow to genocide can easily, without the bat of an eyelid, take off the winter fuel allowance for its pensioners, the poorest of pensioners, can take the winter fuel allowance so that thousands of pensioners die, whether they're black, white, Catholic, Muslim, Protestant or Jewish. They don't care. They don't care what religion you are, what gender you are. It's all about class. They are making ordinary working class people suffer for their political ideology. And it's only the poor that will suffer. The other point I wanted to make today, it may not be popular, but it's about time we started talking about the weapons. And I don't mean the F-35s or whatever number it is that's bombing people in tents. I don't even mean these booby-trapped technological things like pages and mobile phones. I don't even mean them. Let's all have a look at what really enabled Israel to do what it's doing. The weapon that they used was so dirty and so filthy that we haven't really talked about it to any extent. That weapon was weaponizing fake anti-Semitism, and it was used. And it was used to divide our movement. It was used to destroy Jeremy Corbyn. It was used so that we were afraid to defend our comrades, to stand by quite often our Jewish comrades who were targeted by the Labour Party. And let's face it, where did those lies come from? They come from within the Labour Party, and they also came through the pages of the Jewish Chronicle. And you can see what happened. The Jewish Chronicle has a direct line to Netanyahu, to the IDF, and to the generals for Israel that are carrying out a genocide. Let's all talk about this fake anti-Semitism. It was wrong, it was disgraceful, and it destroyed our movement. We've got unity now. Let's use our unity. Let's challenge anyone who says anything that tries to discredit us. We're the people for peace. We're the people who are anti-racist. We're the people who are fighting for a better world. Unite together. Solidarity to everybody. Do not accept the lies.
I speak to you representing the trauma and the pain and the suffering of every Nakba survivor. Every survivor who has seen the ugly face of the occupation. The mother of the martyr in Gaza who grieves the life of her baby, stolen from her way too early. The schoolboy who's sound asleep, stolen, abducted from his bed and locked up in a torture camp from Jenin. I speak to you on behalf of the bride who became a widow on her wedding night in Tulkarem. The orphan child who survived his entire family, who has promised, who has vowed to resist until he dies. The lifeless body. The lifeless body of a youth who was thrown from the rooftops by an occupier devoid of all humanity in the village of Qabatia, and the girl whose body was crushed by a bulldozer until her eyes were blackened with blood. I represent every single one of them, and you represent every single one of them, and you raise your voices so that Labour can hear. We want a ceasefire now.
Now Starmer has shown himself to be a loyal ally of Netanyahu's murderous government. He consolidated his power by silencing and purging the anti-Zionist and socialist left from Labour. His first response to the genocide was to say Israel has the right to defend itself by murdering civilians. And even now, he refuses to allow the words genocide or apartheid to be spoken at the Labour conference. The fact that his rhetoric has softened shows the power of our movement for Palestinian liberation. The suspension, however, of a fraction of UK arms sales to Israel is a token gesture, and now is not the time for half measures. We need an immediate ban on all arms sales, the severing of diplomatic ties with the Zionist state. Without this, Israel will continue murdering Palestinian civilians with impunity. Labour cannot sit on the fence. They are either with the oppressed or with the oppressor. Keir Starmer must ban all arms sales immediately. Demand an immediate and unconditional ceasefire for the people of Gaza and the withdrawal of all Israeli troops from the occupied territories.
I'm not going to do a speech, I'm going to read. because I think these words say so much. This is a diary entry written by Sunda Sada, who is a writer based in Gaza. Of course, they don't intend to kill me, even when they dropped a 2,000-pound bombs on us, even when they rain down bombardments across entire neighbourhoods and make life impossible in the city. No, don't understand. Don't misunderstand. They are merely eradicating terrorism. Today, terrorism was hiding in the body of Omar, my 6-year-old nephew, perhaps in his heart, or maybe in his soft locks of hair. So they killed him. They dropped 2 missiles on him and his siblings, Aya and Hamad, and his niece Sila, who was only 6 months old, killing them all. At 5 o'clock this morning, my sister Randa woke to strange noises around her house. She roused her husband to investigate, and as soon as they opened the window, 2 explosions shook them, and a thick layer of smoke filled the air. Fearing a sniper, Randa fell to the floor and crawled on her hands and knees to wake her children. As soon as they went downstairs, shells began hitting the courtyard. They began to sprint into the garden one by one, holding a white flag above their heads as they ran. The air was filled with the smell of gunpowder. A dense fog enveloped the neighbourhood, and the sounds of cannons echoed on all sides. The family ran as fast as they could towards the entrance of a side street. A quadcopter drone flying low above the rooftops noticed them and rained bullets down on them. Then, realising they were still alive, they got to their feet and ran with all their might, driven by the profoundest of instincts, survival. Some ran into a house at the end of the street. Others continued running along the wall. Nowhere was safe, so they kept moving. After half an hour running like this, they reached a school affiliated with UNRWA and took refuge. But the missiles followed them. My 6-year-old nephew Omar was struck in the head by a piece of shrapnel and died instantly. My brother Hamad, sister Aya, and niece Sila were left wounded, bleeding. This was Omar's first year in elementary school, but he never got to memorise the route each morning to school or to mischievously ring doorbells and run away before anyone came. He chose another path, a more peaceful one, to soar with the flocks of young pigeons to the skies above Gaza City. Samir dragged Omar's siblings with the help of a local resident to a nearby house and tried every possible way to stop their bleeding. To no avail. Aya was wounded in the side, Hamad in the chest and legs. Samir ran out again, trying to find an ambulance, even though he himself had been injured by shrapnel in his throat and had lost a tooth in his lower jaw. Hamad followed Omar after an hour of bleeding, and Aya joined them minutes later. Sila remained bleeding. After 12 hours of bleeding, Sila decided to let go of this world and turned its back on her. Until we meet again, my summer fruit. Thank you.
Today marks the beginning of a new era of student activism, the beginning of the newly formed Student Federation for a Liberated Palestine. Woo! We represent a coalition of 20 university encampments, and our numbers are growing every day. Our universities have failed us. Our politicians have failed us. Our cowardly new Labour government refuses to even use the word genocide. In fact, they've gone as far to block the use of the word genocide at conference. I have marched here today with hundreds of my fellow students from up and down the country. I'm so proud to be one of them. I'm so proud of our power, of our unity, of our fight for justice. So my final message is one to Keir Starmer and our new Labour government. You see these hundreds of students here today. Do you see these thousands of young people? Let this be a reminder to you that you can no longer take the youth vote for granted. No longer can you treat young people as if they're apathetic, uneducated, and uninformed. No longer can you act as if our voices don't matter. Keir Starmer, can you hear us? Can you see us? We are political, we are powerful, we